All right, so this is the part of the show where we give you an idea of the big stories you should know about that aren't necessarily on your front pages. Today we're honing in on this, the dramatic fall of the statue of slave trader Edward Colston at the Black Lives Matter protest in Bristol, that's in London, on Sunday, has sparked renewed calls for the removal of Cecil Rhodes' statue at Oxford University. Now, the Rhodes Must Fall movement in Oxford has voiced solidarity with the Black Lives Matter protest in the United States. That's also spread across the globe, and they're calling for an end to anti-blackness. I'm now joined via Skype line by Rhodes Must Fall activist Laura Stewart, who will help us understand these issues a bit better. Laura, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM Report. So in many respects, we've been here before, haven't we? The Rhodes Must Fall protest at UCT in 2015, protests over Confederate statues in Charlottesville in the US in 2017, and here we are yet again. Do you feel like we're having the same conversations over and over? And if so, what does that tell us about the progress we're making?
Yes, thank you, Ayanda. We do feel that the conversation is happening over and over, but I think we are facilitating now a very new and different conversation, I think, in comparison to 2015, 2016, when we feel that the political climate and mood was very different. Now what we see is an opportunity really for people to critically reflect on what has changed since 2015, 2016, and to take advantage of what is a global moment in consideration of, you know, what our communal values are in terms of democracy and equity and valuing Black lives, to say we've changed our minds and that we're willing to reflect more on what it looks like to democratize space, to value Black lives, and really to do that by getting rid of colonial iconography.
Yeah, but what has changed, Laura? I mean, you know, we're still getting people in the US suffering police brutality at the hands of mostly white police officers, black people at that. There's still a lot of people still, you know, left on the margins here in South Africa, and that divide is still racialized. Your take on what's changed since then?
I think certainly what has changed is what we see as a political life of various pandemics coming to a crux. So we see the pandemic in terms of race, racism, but also in terms of public health issues because of COVID. So we've had an extended lockdown across countries. We've had skyrocketing unemployment rates. And again, we think that this has really created or facilitated a moment that didn't exist before for people to say, you know, we have taken a step back. We've looked at where we are as a global society, and really what is happening is not reflective of who we are as peace-loving, democracy-loving, and equity-loving people.
Right. And, you know, there's still people pushing back, suggesting that having things like statues removed is, you know, just a smokescreen that fails to really address what people are calling for at the heart of the protest, which is real socio-economic reform, even in things like laws and policy. In what ways do we ensure that this is really just, I guess, a means to an end than an end in and of itself? Because this, I guess, the moment of seeing a statue fall feels quite spectacular, but on the ground it doesn't really change much for people's lives, does it?
Yes, I think you're right to a certain extent. I should clarify that what we are calling for at the protest later today is not for the toppling or the removal of the statue, but rather we see this peaceful protest as an opportunity to democratize a conversation that has previously taken place, where one side has really stifled the movement through their wealth, their power, and their influence. Now we are saying that we are coming out as a critical mass to democratize conversation and to create a forum to discuss the demands that we have, both of Oxford as an institution, but really of other institutions. So I think it's important to note that this statue of Rhodes, or the Rhodes Must Fall movement in Oxford, isn't specific just to Rhodes. Rhodes is certainly a symbol of the colonial iconography, the colonial apologism that we see in our society today, but this is certainly a broader conversation. And so what we hope is that we are giving everyone an opportunity to critically reflect, to change their minds, as an enlightened and, you know, educated public has the right to do, and then extend this conversation around the symbolism and the sort of racist specter that we're seeing come to the fore, to really to denounce that through this symbolic gesture.
Right. You know, you speak about reflecting critically. The past waves of the movement, so to speak, have also been criticized for not doing enough of that, particularly within the movement, because whilst, A Rhodes Must Fall is an organization pushing back against hegemony and the ways through which discrimination take place, it doesn't mean the group itself is immune from those issues, right? Issues around patriarchy, like homophobia, etc., etc. Reflect to us about perhaps some of the ways through which the movement in and of itself is thinking these things through as you fight the broader sort of global structural issues.
I think you bring up a very important point, Ayanda, which we have really tried to grapple with as a movement here in Oxford. Obviously, the action that we are planning here in Oxford and also this movement, Rhodes Must Fall in Oxford, is very much inspired by the actions of students in Cape Town in South Africa. We are grappling as far as possible with what the political situation is, both within the movement, but also in terms of the support that we have from a broader public. I think the fact that this movement has generated support, for example, from Oxford City Council, who've actually come out with an incredible act of solidarity in the form of a petition to encourage the university to remove that statue, is symbolic of the fact that we are constantly reflecting and that we are applying lessons learned so that we don't repeat the mistakes that we made in 2015, 2016.
Yeah, that's been the goal of societies the world over, to learn from our past. Thank you very much for your time. Certainly appreciate your time and your insights. That there is Laura Stewart, who's an activist with the Rhodes Must Fall movement in Oxford.